It's been called the largest wealth transfer in human history, roughly $124 trillion. The estimated fortune of the baby boomer generation expected to pass down to millennials and Gen Z over the coming decades, according to Cerulli Associates. For a generation weighed down by student debt and priced out of housing, it looked like a financial lifeline, a once-in-a-lifetime event that could reshape the economic future of millions. But across the United States, that transfer isn't unfolding the way economists predicted. In fact, a growing share of that money may never reach the next generation at all. The question is no longer how big the wealth transfer will be. The question is, where is the money actually going? Reason number one: exploding healthcare and long-term care costs. The single biggest reason the projected $124 trillion boomer wealth transfer is shrinking comes down to one factor: healthcare. Longer lifespans, combined with limited coverage for long-term care, are steadily draining retirement savings and home equity, often faster than families expect. Medicare, the primary health program for retirees, does not cover long-term custodial care. That includes the daily support many people eventually need: help with bathing, eating, dressing, or mobility. Instead, it focuses on short-term medical treatment, leaving the majority of ongoing care costs to individuals and families. And those costs are substantial. A single year in a nursing home now averages well over $110,000 for a semi-private room and can exceed $129,000 for a private room. With higher prices in many states, assisted living and memory care facilities can push total expenses even further. As the oldest baby boomers move into their 80s and beyond, many will require care for years, sometimes a decade or more. Over time, those costs can reach hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. Even outside of long-term care, healthcare expenses in retirement remain significant. Estimates from Fidelity show that a 65-year-old couple retiring today can expect to spend roughly $300,000 to $345,000 on medical expenses throughout retirement. That figure does not include long-term care. At the same time, healthcare inflation continues to outpace general price increases, meaning these costs often rise faster than savings or investment returns. As a result, many families are forced to draw down assets. Retirement accounts are liquidated. Home equity is tapped. Savings are redirected toward care. For middle-class households without long-term care insurance, the impact is especially severe. Many are pushed into a spend-down process, exhausting assets until they qualify for Medicaid, often leaving little behind. The effect is clear. Large portions of what was expected to become inheritance are instead being used to fund medical care. The $124 trillion wealth transfer is not disappearing, it's being redirected. And in many cases, it is flowing not to the next generation, but into hospitals, nursing homes, and the broader healthcare system. Until long-term care planning becomes more widespread or policy changes address the coverage gap, healthcare costs will remain the dominant force reshaping the outcome. What was once expected to be a historic transfer of wealth is increasingly being consumed before it can ever be passed on. Reason number two: boomers choosing to spend it all. The die with zero mentality. Not all of the disappearing wealth is being lost to external forces. A growing share is being spent by design. Across the United States, a significant number of baby boomers are making a deliberate choice to use their wealth during their lifetime rather than preserve it for the next generation. And that shift is becoming one of the most powerful forces reshaping the projected $124 trillion wealth transfer. Recent surveys point to a clear pattern. A Northwestern Mutual study found that only about 22% of baby boomers plan to leave an inheritance for their children. More than half say they intend to spend their money themselves, leaving little or nothing behind. For many, passing down wealth is no longer a primary financial goal. This mindset becomes even more pronounced among wealthier households. A Charles Schwab survey of high-net-worth individuals found that 45% of baby boomers prefer to enjoy my money for myself while I'm still alive, rather than give it away early or leave a large inheritance. By comparison, only 11% of Gen Xers and 15% of Millennials expressed the same preference. The difference is generational. Many boomers view the wealth they accumulated as something earned, something meant to provide comfort, flexibility, and security in retirement, not necessarily something that must be passed down intact. This thinking aligns with what has become known as the die with zero philosophy, a mindset that prioritizes spending over saving in the later stages of life. It encourages individuals to use their resources for experiences, travel, and quality of life rather than preserving large estates. And that is exactly what many are doing. Retirement accounts are being drawn down, assets are sold when needed, spending shifts toward travel, leisure, and lifestyle upgrades. Longer, healthier lifespans have made this approach more common. With decades of retirement ahead, many boomers are choosing to maximize those years rather than conserve wealth for an uncertain future. The impact on the broader wealth transfer is significant. What was once expected to be a large, one-time inheritance is increasingly being reduced over time. Wealth is being consumed gradually across the final 20 to 30 years of life, leaving smaller estates at the end. Even when assets remain, they are often diminished after years of spending on experiences, supplemental healthcare, and day-to-day living. The contrast with younger generations is clear. Many millennials and Gen Z still anticipate inheritances as a way to support housing, education, or long-term financial security. But for many boomers, the role of that wealth is changing. They raised their children, they built their careers, and now they are choosing to use what they earned. The result is a shift in where the money goes, not disappearing, but being redirected. And unless more households adopt earlier gifting strategies or shift toward legacy-focused planning, this spend-it-all approach will continue to reduce the amount of wealth ultimately passed down. For the next generation, the expectation of inheritance is colliding with a new reality. Much of that wealth is being used long before it ever reaches them. Reason number 3. Rising childless rates and wealth redirected elsewhere. Another major reason the projected $124 trillion wealth transfer is shrinking has less to do with spending or healthcare, and more to do with demographics, specifically who the money is meant to go to. A growing share of baby boomers are reaching retirement age without direct heirs, and when there are no children to inherit wealth, that money does not flow downward to younger generations in the way many economic forecasts assume. Instead, it is redirected. Across the United States, the rate of childlessness among older adults has risen significantly compared to previous generations. Millions of Americans aged 55 and older now have no biological or adopted children. Smaller family sizes, delayed parenthood, and personal choice have all contributed to this shift. The result is structural. A meaningful portion of boomer wealth has no natural path to flow directly to millennials or Gen Z, so the money moves elsewhere. In many cases, assets are left to extended family, nieces, nephews, or siblings. In others, wealth is directed toward close friends or even pets through formal trust arrangements. Increasingly, it is being allocated to charitable organizations and philanthropic causes. For many childless boomers, estate planning reflects personal values rather than family lineage. And while some wealth does reach extended relatives, it often bypasses the broader population of younger Americans who were expected to benefit most from this transfer. The impact becomes clearer at the national level. Estimates suggest that 70 to 80% of U.S. households are projected to receive no inheritance at all from this massive transfer, which means the distribution is highly uneven. A significant share of the $124 trillion is expected to flow to a relatively small group of families, often those who already hold substantial wealth and have direct heirs. This creates a concentration effect. Rather than being widely distributed across the population, the wealth transfer becomes increasingly narrow, benefiting those already positioned to receive it, while leaving the majority with little or nothing. That outcome challenges the original narrative. The idea that this transfer would broadly support younger generations, helping with housing, education, or financial security, is beginning to break down. Instead, much of the wealth is being redirected away from a broad base of recipients and towards smaller, more concentrated channels. Combined with rising healthcare costs and changing spending patterns, the growing number of childless households is reshaping where the money ultimately goes. The wealth transfer is still happening, but for many Americans, it is happening somewhere else. Reason number 4. Wealth locked in illiquid housing and forced sales for care. A large share of boomer wealth isn't held in cash or investments. It's tied up in real estate. For many households, 25 to 50% of total wealth is concentrated in the primary home. And because many boomers plan to age in place, that equity often remains locked in, unconverted into liquid assets that could be more easily passed on or gifted. On paper, that wealth appears substantial. In practice, it is difficult to access. The challenges often emerge late. When long-term care becomes necessary, or when estates are settled, these homes frequently become complicated assets for heirs. Many properties are outdated, require significant repairs, or are located in areas that no longer align with where younger generations live or work. That leaves heirs with a difficult choice: keep a property they may not want, or sell it under pressure. And in many cases, the sale is not optional. Homes are often liquidated quickly to fund care or close estates. But forced or time-sensitive sales come with costs. Real estate commissions, closing fees, repairs, and transaction expenses can reduce proceeds significantly. In some cases, the total reduction can reach 10 to 20% or more. Add potential capital gains taxes and unfavorable market timing, and the final value can shrink further. What looked like substantial equity on paper becomes much smaller in reality. There's also a broader market effect. By holding on to homes for extended periods, older homeowners reduce available housing supply. That tight supply can contribute to higher prices and rents, making it more difficult for younger buyers to enter the market and build equity of their own. The outcome is a disconnect. Instead of receiving liquid wealth that can be easily used for housing, education, or debt reduction, many heirs inherit an asset that is illiquid, costly to maintain, and difficult to convert at full value. The wealth hasn't disappeared, but it hasn't transferred cleanly either. What was expected to be a straightforward handoff of home equity often arrives reduced, delayed, and far less useful than anticipated. The $124 trillion transfer isn't disappearing by accident. It is being consumed, redirected, and concentrated long before it ever reaches the next generation. For millions of Americans, the inheritance they expected isn't delayed. It's already gone, and the reality is becoming clear. The greatest wealth transfer in history may never reach most people at all.